Hi everyone, I'm Maxi.
Quack quack.
In this video, I want to teach you how I use Figma to design things like these. If you've designed a website or worked in IT, you might have heard of Figma. It's a tool for designers that allows them to collaborate on and prototype UI for websites, apps, etc. I used to use it for designing websites for my school projects, but I recently discovered that I can use it for illustrations if I don't need to save them as an SVG. Also, since it has a free version and you can use it on browser, I find that it's super accessible if you're looking for a design tool. In this video, I'll cover some of the basics and walk you through my design process with Figma. So let's try to design a simple streamer schedule together.
Quack quack.
When you open up Figma, it's gonna look something like this. What I have is the desktop version, but the browser version will look more or less the same. On the left panel, you'll see information about yourself and other settings, your recent files, your themes, and if you're on the free version like I am, most of your files will have to stay as drafts because there's a limit to how many files a theme can have. So to start designing, you can just click the design file button at the top right.
Quack quack.
I usually start my designs by creating a frame in the size and shape that I need. To do that, I select the frame tool, and on the design panel to the right, you'll see a lot of size options. A lot of them are for devices because web and app designers would be looking to create frames in that size, but I typically use the slide 16:9 setting under presentations. So now that you have your frame, you can rename it to make it easier to find. I like to use frames because it allows me to easily organize and move my objects around. My projects typically have hundreds of shapes and hundreds of frames, so being able to contain everything in one frame makes all the layers easier to manage. There's also more features to them, but that's kind of complex, so I'll talk about them in a later video. You can adjust the zoom by clicking Control and using the scroll wheel, or selecting the zoom and view settings in the top right. And you can also move around by clicking the middle mouse button or the scroll wheel button, or selecting the hand button on the toolbar.
Quack quack.
Since this is a streamer schedule, I'll need some rectangles which will contain the stream information text. So I can do that by selecting the Shapes tool and choosing Rectangle. Now in my frame, I can draw the shape. Make sure to pay attention to your layers panel because if your shape is not in the frame, you won't be able to move them around together. So for example, I'll take that out and I can't move them together. So to include it in the frame, you can just drag it back into the frame. And now I can move it around. So to create multiple of these, I can just copy and paste by clicking Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V over and over again. Now I have 7.
Quack quack.
Notice that when you select the shape, the detail panel shows you more options. So the top section allows you to align and position multiple shapes relative to each other. So if you're selecting one shape, aligning it will position the shape relative to the first frame that contains it. So if I want to align it to the left side, it will do that, middle or right, or top, middle, bottom. I move these out of the way. Since my main frame is containing these shapes, it was adjusting relative to the main frame. But if I create another frame inside, it will adjust relative to that frame now. So this frame is inside the new frame, which is inside the stream schedule frame. So I will adjust it, and it's adjusting relative to the new frame. Now if you're selecting multiple shapes, they'll align relative to each other. So this will align them all to the middle, to the top, to the center, or to the bottom. You can also distribute the vertical spacing. So you can do that by either hovering over the pink line, like so, and adjusting, or you can adjust using the vertical spacing field here. Let's say I want to align these shapes to the middle of the stream schedule, or maybe the right or the left. They're not working because they're individual shapes and they're just being aligned relative to each other. To do that, you can actually just group them by either grouping Ctrl G or by right clicking and selecting group selection. So now you can align this group in the middle, left, or right. That's because you can think of the group as just one object.
Quack, quack.
So the next section is simply about sizes and positioning. X allows you to adjust the horizontal position. Y allows you to adjust the vertical position. W allows you to adjust the width. H allows you to adjust the height. You can constrain or unconstrain the shape proportions by pressing this chain icon to the right. Regardless of what the width is, they'll retain the same proportions or width to height ratio. You can rotate with the angle field. You can adjust the border radius. You can customize which corners you want to have different border radius. And you can actually do all of these with the move tool as well. So when you've selected your shape, the blue bounding box will appear. You can resize by dragging on the corner. If you want to retain the same width to height ratio, you can hold shift. You can rotate by waiting for the rotate icon to pop up a little offset from the corner. And if you zoom in close enough on a rectangle, you can also adjust the border radius that way.
Quack, quack.
I'll skip constraints for now, but the next section allows you to change the blending mode, opacity, and visibility of the shapes.
Quack, quack.
Next, you can adjust the fill of the object. You can change the fill by clicking on the square to the left of the hex code. You can choose either a solid fill, gradient fill, or an image to fill the objects. The video fill is only for professional teams. You can change the blending mode of the fill by clicking on the droplet icon, and you can also change the opacity and visibility of the fill or just remove it completely. So the nice thing about Figma is you can actually add multiple fill layers, which opens up a lot of possibilities for your shape designs.
Quack, quack.
Next, you can adjust the stroke of the object. You can adjust the color, opacity, and blending modes in the same way that we did with the fill. You can adjust the width of the stroke, and you can choose if the stroke lies inside, on the center, or outside of the shape. You can even customize where the stroke will appear if you want to. If you want the left border to have a thicker stroke, you can do that. And with the advanced options, you can customize the stroke if you want it to become a dashed line, for example. You can choose the dash cap, and you can make the join be rounded. So let's use an outside and make it a bit more obvious that it's rounded. So I prefer to use the rounded joins on my designs because it just looks a bit cleaner.
Quack, quack.
Finally, you can add effects to your shape. The drop shadow adds a shadow behind the shape. The inner shadow adds a shadow inside the shape. The layer blur blurs the design in the shape. And it's a bit more obvious if the fill is an image, so let's try that. So we can increase the blur and it's becoming more obvious that the layer is being blurred. Lastly, and what I find the most cool, is the background blur, which means that whatever is behind the shape will be blurred. So to demonstrate that, I'm gonna have to lower the opacity a bit and create a new shape behind that has an image. Put it behind all the other shapes, and you can see it's getting a bit blurry. To make it more obvious, I'll increase the blur more.
Quack, quack.
Let's say that you don't want to use a basic shape. You can actually make your own with the pen and pencil tool. So with the pen tool, you can just click to make your shapes. fill it, add effects, whatever you want. And with the pencil tool, you can just draw anything you want.
Quack, quack.
To add text to your work, you can just select the text tool. You can change the font style, the font size, line height, letter spacing, and paragraph spacing. You can also adjust the alignment of the text. Auto width means that the bounding box of the text will adjust depending on the width of the text. Auto height means that it will adjust depending on the text's height, but retain the same width. And fixed size just means that the bounding box will stay the same regardless of the contents. You can adjust where on the bounding box your text will be placed. So here I have it set to the top. If I want it to be aligned in the middle, I can do that, or at the bottom.
Quack, quack.
Lastly, I want to talk about the scale tool. You'll notice that when I resize these rectangles with the move tool, at some point they get too small and you can't anymore see the gaps between them. Sometimes you don't want that, but the reason it happens is because the stroke size stays the same. You can avoid this by using the scale tool. So what it does is it will scale the stroke relative to the size of your shapes. Now you can see that the gaps between them can still be seen even though it's really small. This works for text as well. With the regular move tool, I can resize just the bounding box. But if I use the scale tool, it will resize the text size as well.
Quack, quack.
So let's put what we learned to practice. First, I'll adjust my stream schedule frame to give it a nice blue gradient color. Now, I'll give my rectangles a bit of a lighter color so that it will be easier to read the text that's inside them. I also prefer them to have a bit of a rounder border radius. And I'll adjust the stroke to make it a bit more distinguishable between the background but not too dark. And now we have what I think is a pretty good base for our stream schedule design.
Quack, quack.
I hope you learned something from this video. It's my first time making a full-length tutorial video, so it was a good challenge. I'm planning to create a video series of these Figma tutorials, so I'm looking forward to your feedback about it. Please consider subscribing to my channel if this video helped you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye!
Quack, quack.